Beat you to it this time. What a good worship service so far. I'm telling you. I am uplifted already. I'll try not to give you a downer now. We'll work on that. Oh, it's been a wonderful few weeks, I'm telling you. We've had additions to the Lord, and we've had people calling and wanting to come back. Haven't got a hold of some of those folks yet, but the Word is working. The Word is working. There's just no question about it. Amen. God's Word will work. Yes. It just doesn't all work at the same time on everyone. I've been thinking a lot about this, and Michael brought up something that he had been thinking about as we were talking the other day. He was talking about the reading that Jake just read about the laborers in the vineyard. I want to talk about that a little bit, and I want to go some other places too. But I want us to think about this concept of these laborers all being called at different times of the day, and just exactly what that means when you compare it to the world and the world we're living in. The kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers in his vineyard. The very beginning. Now you know each of us have a beginning. Each of us are born into this world, and we're given this treasure in an earthen vessel, this spirit that God puts in this human body. And He gives us free rein on this world to go and to do, to choose. If you don't believe in free will, I don't even know why you're here. I don't know what point there would be in anybody doing anything to serve God if free will is not what God gives us when He puts us on this earth. So we're born, and we start from that very moment in shaping our character. And I think this is the answer to the question about the spirit and the form and the soul. Body, soul, and spirit. Because you have a spirit that God gives us, and you have a form that our parents kind of give us, but God's involved in it too. And then when you take those two things and you put them together, it forms a soul. A soul that develops a character throughout its existence in this world. A soul that determines good and evil for itself. A soul that decides what direction it's going to go and what kind of person it's going to be. And that's kind of like the beginning of the day that we have here. Now, of course, the landowner is the Lord. And the field, the vineyard, is the world. It's actually our time on this earth. When he agreed with the laborers for a denarius for the day, he sent them out into the vineyard. Now, he hires these laborers at the very earliest of the day. The day, Jewish day, is a complicated thing. Not really, but it is to some. Because the day begins at 6 in the evening. You ever wondered about what the word evening means? Actually, it's before Eve. We have Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve. We have all of these eves, and we know that those are before the daylight part of that day. Christmas Eve is before the day part of Christmas. So the first part of the Jewish day was from sundown to sunrise, or 6 to 6. So sometime at the very beginning, 6 o'clock, the landowner was out there hiring or calling workers. Come on, I got a job for you. Reminds me of the day worker place that there was where if you wanted to work, you'd be there at a certain time, and whoever had need for workers would come and pick you up at that place, and that's when you'd go out and work. My uncle used to do that for his tobacco farm. I remember going with him, loading the pickup up and going back and dropping the guys off, and they'd go to work. Usually it was before daybreak. But there was some that started that early, right at the very beginning of their day, right at the beginning of life. Some of us are attuned to what God is saying. Some of us are listening right at the very beginning of our lives. It says, and he went out about the third hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace. Evidently, they didn't get there that early. Evidently, they didn't hear the call or something. They weren't around when the first load got taken. So they're still there. So the third hour, that would be 9 o'clock in the morning. My dad would say, "You're burning daylight, son." It's the day's half over at 9 in the morning. He went out the third hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And he said to them, "You also go into the vineyard, and whatever's right, I will give you." So they went. Now, who is it that determines what's right? Who is it that's going to determine what he pays those people? Well, he agreed that he'd pay a denarius to the first ones who are going to work all day. That's an agreement. I'll give you a day's wage for a day's labor. You know what a day's wage was? It was this word here, denarius, and it varied depending on what the minimum wage was or what the day's wage was. The Romans, it was a bag of salt that could fit in the palm of your hand. That's where the term salary comes from, saline, salt. That's what is a man worth his salt? That's what that comes from. Comes from the word salary, which is salt, which was a payment for Romans because it was so valuable. He says in verse 5, again, he went out about the 6th hour. Now, that's 6 hours after 6 o'clock, so that's noon. He goes out, and lunchtime, here's a bunch of people standing there, and then he goes out at the 11th hour. What happened to the 9th hour? Yeah, he did. He went out at the 9th hour, too. So, started at 6, 9, noon, 3. He needed workers. And it didn't matter that the day was partly gone. He could still get some help from these people. And you never know how much help you're going to get from somebody in a very short amount of time. Because some people are workers and other people are workers. So he goes out at every opportunity. And he hires people in 11th hour. Now, this 11th hour would be 5 o'clock in the evening. And you quit working at 6, that's not very long. It says, he went out the 11th hour and finding others standing around, he said to them, "You've been standing here idle all day?" And they said, "No one hired us." And he said to them, "You go into the vineyard too." When evening came, the landowner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call these laborers in and give them their wages, beginning with the last group to the first." Now, I can understand what's going on here. I told you I was a union president at one time. I know how people feel about somebody getting something more than they get. I understand that principle. I understand how people get their feelings all hurt when somebody didn't work as long as they did and they get the same money. This is a natural way for people to look at things. If he gets that for what he did, I should get more for what I do. But there's some things that we don't see about this. For instance, I've had people that I spend a lot of time working in plants, with a constant flow of different workers that come through. And I'll tell you what, there are some guys that are worth more in 10 minutes than others are in a full day's not working. There are some people that their whole person is devoted to whatever it is you're doing. And they're worth a lot to you. Now, when I read this, I see more than just what's paid and the time spent. I see that the Lord sees that some people are worth more per hour than other people are. Now, that may not be what he's talking about here, but I can see it in the real world. I can see this principle play out in every kind of job I've ever had. I can see the principle of what's going on here. But we talk about, this is talking about the kingdom of heaven. Have you ever thought about what actually is being discussed here? People talk about degrees of punishment and degrees of reward. Well, is this talking about degrees of reward? Is it talking about degrees in anything? I want to go to another one, and I want to read it in Matthew 25. Let's talk about another of the parables that Jesus gives, and it's the parable of the talents. For it is just like a man about to go on a journey, who called his own slaves and entrusted his possessions to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, each according to his ability. And he went on his journey. Immediately the one who had received the 5 talents went out and traded with them and gained 5 more talents. I think this is the guy that is worth more in 10 minutes than you can kind of see this in the. It says, in the same manner, the one who had received 2 talents went out and gained 2 more. But the one who received 1 talent went away and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. I've thought an awful lot about this, and I look at my own life, and I can see me in every one of these characters here. Because the first part of my life, man, I was less than worthless to the Lord. Because I was actually taking people away from the Lord. For a long time, I did nothing with what God gave me. It wasn't until I met her. And for some reason, she sparked in me a desire to be a better man. Which kind of started with getting right with God. Now, I kind of compare that to some of those people, not at the very first of the day, but somewhere along during the middle of the day. Somewhere long after I should have been working, I wasn't. And I wasn't even listening for the call to go to work. Now these guys right here, these ones, it says it's all based on their talents, on their abilities. And I don't know about all that, because I don't know what abilities you have. I don't even know what abilities I have. It's kind of like, a coach watching children. I could tell you when I was coaching baseball, I could tell you which boys just need to go home. Just go on home, son. You're never going to be a baseball player. And I could tell the ones that had more talent than they even dreamed of. I could tell the ones that were just lazy, just didn't want to do anything. And I could tell the ones that had more desire than they had ability. The ones that were overachievers, the ones that did more with what they have than all the rest of them put together. The Lord does know those things. And the Lord made some promises to us. Some promises that comes true at various times or different times in our lives. We don't all get the call at the same time. Now, when I say that, I'm not talking about some mysterious voice out of heaven calling us. I'm talking about what Jesus promised when He said, ask, keep asking, and it will be given to you. Seek, keep seeking, and you will find. Knock, keep knocking, and it will be open to you. These things happen at different times in people's lives, and I'm convinced that we need certain experiences in our lives to make us more profitable to the Lord in the work that we do. Now, I'm not saying the Lord sent me off to be an evil person, but I'll tell you what, I learned some things. I learned some things while I was in the world that have been invaluable to me after I started listening to God. There are lifetimes that we live. Did you know that Moses spent 80 years getting ready to serve God for 40? Much longer in his preparation than it was in his actual service to God. So I don't think we need to feel embarrassed or need to feel left out. I don't think we need to feel anything when we are converted to the Lord at the 11th hour. Because here's one thing for sure that I've learned that I think is extremely important for us to put in the back of our minds and keep there all the time. Bring it to the forefront when needed. And that is, our God is a from now on God. Doesn't matter what hour. I'm not going to worry about a deathbed confession. I'm going to rejoice over the deathbed confession. Let God sort that out. Let the Lord deal with that. But I'm telling you, when we start talking about that person doesn't deserve what this person does because that person has spent their whole lives doing it, I think about some other things that need to be added to that equation. I want to read you something. Let's go back to Matthew chapter 7, where we were talking. In Matthew chapter 7, the Lord had this to say. In verse 24, He says, "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and acts upon them may be compared to a wise man who built his house upon a rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, the winds blew and slammed against the house, and yet it did not fall, for it had been founded on the rock. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act upon them will be like a foolish man who built his house upon the sand. The rain fell, and the floods came, the winds blew and slammed against that house, and it fell, and great was its fall." When Jesus had finished these words, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one having authority, and not as their scribes. Teaching about building your house upon a solid foundation. You know, some people build quickly and some people build slowly. It takes forever for some people to build a house or to even get started on building their house. Ron and I are smiling at each other because we both want one. Neither of us have started on it yet. But you know, once the house is finished, it doesn't matter when you started on it. I was thinking about this in terms of how to explain this 11th hour thing, and how to explain some people getting it right from the very beginning and some people not getting it until the last. In school, some people, just they catch on so quick. The teacher barely gets the book out, and these people are already understanding what's the end of the course. And if they took the test for the course right then, they could pass it. And some people catch on somewhere in the middle. And some people are cramming the night before the final. But you know what? It really doesn't matter when you caught on. It matters about the final test. It matters whether you caught on before the course was over. Our course is life. Our opportunity to learn and to shape and to mold our future is life. Use our lives to prepare and to be as fruitful as we can to the Lord, because it's to Him that we owe this gratitude. He's the one that's going to determine what we get paid at the end. And I'll tell you what, if I get jealous because you get a better reward in heaven, I'm not going to be in heaven. That jealousy is something that doesn't belong there. Amen. And I can guarantee you this, I'm sure of this, that somebody like the Apostle Paul is going to be smiled on greater than somebody who spent their whole lives wasting and caught on at the very last minute. But that's making, sometimes in our own minds, that's making a distinction between being saved and what we get paid. And there is a difference between those two. And I don't want to talk about the latter today. I just want to leave it with this thought, that it doesn't matter when we catch on. The first hour, the last hour, as long as we get it. As long as we hear the call, as long as we accept it, we will be saved. Now, the other question that I want to deal with later is, how much does God appreciate what we did once we caught on? I think there's a difference, and I'll show you what I think that difference is. But this morning, if you know that your life is not right with God, if you know that you need to obey the gospel, you need to do something to come back to God, to make your life right before and to make peace with our Lord, don't waste this opportunity. Make your life right this morning as we stand and as we sing the song that Ron has for us. And we're going to talk about that other next time. Won't you come while we stand and sing?
When we walk